Today, I really come with something special. One of those special reads that I only come across every once in a great while, and it just so happens to be another Image comic. And it really makes me think to the beginning of this channel when I first picked up Genesis and realized just how great Image Comics really is, because they take a shot on just about any kind of story at this point. And it's always these weird one-shot stories that absolutely blow me away. And this story is absolutely no exception, because it actually involves Theodore Roosevelt, former president of the United States, as he would actually go on to own a secret sect of the government that would hunt down demons, aliens, creatures of the night, and anything that would go on to destroy the sanctity of America. Fuck yeah! Coming again to save the motherfucking day, yeah! Yes. Fuck yeah. And honestly, it's a story that I'm really excited to show you all, because by the time we actually get to the ending of this thing, it is going to leave your mouth agape. And honestly, it's one of the most creative presidential stories that I think I have ever read. I think this is something that we should show our children to just kind of get them pumped up about the past leaders of our current nation. And honestly, if I could get an entire franchise of these comic books, I would absolutely love that. But as far as I know, there's only about 2 or 3 of these different comic books, and what this actually is called Frazzetta's Creatures. And the only reason that I even own this thing is because it came in a bundle of different horror comic books, and this thing was just slapped dead center in the middle. And really, the whole thing comes across as a weird action movie from the 80s, only involving a president.
They drew first blood, not me.
Let me come in and get you the hell out of there.
They drew first blood.
And instead of Bruce Willis or Sylvester Stallone, it would be Theodore Roosevelt, one of the most honorable men of our nation. And when I sit down and think about it, one of the most perfect ideas that I think I've really come across in one of these strange one-shot comic books. So, without further doubt, everybody, turn off the lights, get yourself some kind of snack, get yourself a beverage, an American bandana, or anything like that, and let's get right into this awesomely epic story. By 1901, when he was inaugurated as President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt had served as an Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Navy, Governor of New York, and led his regiment of Rough Riders to victory during the Spanish-American War. He'd also evaporated the army of Confederate ghosts, sent the brain-suckers from shelters back to the side worlds, and slaughtered the invading soul worms of Cavern City. The latter accomplishments, shared with his top-secret regiment of Dark Riders, have not been made public before now. Between May 1st, 1898 and May 22nd, Roosevelt personally saw to the recruitment of his Dark Riders, a secret organization comprised of a small band of experts, to help him with his increasingly dangerous paranormal investigations. One applicant was Edgar Rice Burroughs. Though publicly turned away behind closed doors, Edgar was inducted into Teddy's Paranormal Investigation Regiment as an expert of the occult. Over the years, a legendary friendship formed as the two men fought to protect humanity from the evils that conspired to destroy us. The following documents their final investigation. And before we cut to our next panel, it needs to be said that Edgar Rice Burroughs is actually the man who was behind the John Carter series, as well as a bunch of different sci-fi novels. And throughout this book, it's going to be mixing a bunch of different characters from the real world into this epic fantasy. And it's something that I really enjoyed, and at first glance, I didn't really recognize who this was, and to be honest, I did have to give it a Google. But nonetheless, to actually see such a team up only made me smile even harder. And it manages to show just how creative Frazzetta really is. And while sometimes I like to sit down and think that, hell, maybe I could write one of these comic books, it's stories like this that really make me think that these people really do have a wild imagination. To have such stories bursting out of their brains, people like Garth Ennis, or Alan Moore, Jeff Lemire to James Tynion, all these different people who manage to just write story after story, and it's these people that make me sit back down in my chair and realize, you know, it's a little tougher than you might think. But with our next panel, we will be cutting to the American-Mexican border, as a group of men roll up to the small village with a horse with a giant trunk upon its back. The intrusion of an alien race into another civilization, its growth and supremacy dying away, is of course curiously paralleled by what we see in the animal world. This parallel is complete at one last point. In such cases, the causes may be shrouded in absolute darkness. And throughout the story, it's basically sprinkled with just a bunch of different speeches from Mr. Roosevelt himself. And while I'm not entirely sure if every single one of them is something that was truly said by Roosevelt, it's just another part of this man that I enjoyed so much. Instead of shooting a demon in the head and giving him some kind of awesome one-liner like groovy, he would inevitably just send shockwaves across these people's minds and hearts with these amazing little speeches. But in the next panel, we would see an older gentleman walking out of this village house and pointing to a glowing green well and explaining that they came from here. And as we watch all these men on horses walking up to this glowing green well, we would see one of Theodore Roosevelt's men asking him if he is ready, carrying a giant trunk off of a horse and unleashing something more powerful than we could ever imagine. For this, Mr. Burroughs, no man is ready for this. But it would appear I'm without recourse. If you don't hear from me in 3 minutes, then you call in the cavalry. Pull the entire danged US Army down here. And without a second glimpse, this amazing man would strap this tank to his back and leap down this well, no questions asked. The gem hums to life, like a tornado of angry bumblebees. Charge surges through my bones, feels like fire. Gives me the strength of 10 men, powers the slugs in my revolvers with a nasty heat. Considering what I'm up against here, I'd be in rough country were I without him. One shot incinerated the sulfuric abomination of Guatemala, and the Mayan calendar says there's a low god scheduled to rise. And I reckon I ought to give him a warm reception. And essentially what this tank on Roosevelt's back actually is something that would actually give him great strength, and something that would actually be powered by a gem from the Mayan god Locketal, the Mayan god of evildoers. And as Teddy Roosevelt begins to walk down these cavernous trenches underneath the earth, he'll begin to see all this chiseled Mayan scripture, things that would actually tell about this ancient evil god being banished on this very same day, on the day that Mars will be completely aligned with Earth, and because of this god would once again be able to rise. And as Teddy begins to walk further and further down, seeing all these great statues and all these depictions of Locketal, he would see a young woman strapped up to a chain on a pillar, and with a second glance next to a very powerful being. Locketal, the ancient Mayan god, and somebody who has been waiting for Roosevelt's presence this entire time. The sacrifices were fruitful. My gem is required. The gem was a gift from Velt, great prince of the seventh plane. I think I'll keep it. And with this small exchange, Theodore Roosevelt would look down at his compass, a device that would actually act as a paranormal radio and something that he can call back to the people up top. And he'll begin to explain that Locketal, the ancient god, is down here, and that in fact, oh boy, that this is some sort of trap. But as Teddy calls out for help, this being will begin to unleash a hell fury from his eyes, and he begins to think to himself that he's barking up the wrong knot, that there's no way he would ever be able to actually best this dog. And as the dust begins to settle, this god would demand for his gem back. And Teddy Roosevelt would tell him to curl his lip, that these sort of things just aren't in the cards for you. And as this ancient beast is closing in on him, as well as a slew of demonic snakes who are capable of actually stealing a man's soul and close him, Teddy Roosevelt would cock his revolver and begin to shoot. And in the next panel, we would see snakeheads flying, as well as this ancient being dashing towards Teddy Roosevelt, until inevitably he would power slide directly underneath him and begin to lay lead to this monster's skull, completely and utterly decapitating this man, and finally leaving Teddy alone to actually go and rescue this poor woman trapped underneath the earth. But as Teddy looks closer and closer to this woman's neck, he would see that all these demonic snakes are actually wrapped around this woman, and that he needs to be ever more careful of actually tearing these things away from this woman, because with one bite, his soul would be completely forfeit. But for Teddy Roosevelt, this is no big chore, and he begins to rip and tear at these snakes until it is done, setting this woman free until inevitably he would look behind him and once again see this ancient being rise for the second time. And once again, Teddy would be in the fight of his life. Dang, I got black demons and blood snakes crawling up my keister. Get a line down here. But as Teddy Roosevelt is calling out on this paranormal radio, he would only hear the Dodgers game playing out through. And with this, Teddy Roosevelt would stay in character, screaming out in the air, "Oh, peanut brittle! Dang this contraption! Edgar, where's that rescue? Have a Coke and a smile." And in the very last minute, a chain would descend from the top of this well, giving escape to Teddy and this lone woman in the cavern, and pulling them up to the surface. But with this, Teddy knows exactly what is about to happen, and he begins to tell his Dark Riders to get ready, to stand the gap, that they're only about 2 whoops and a holler away from the end of the world. And as everybody is wondering just exactly what is about to happen, we would see a giant 20-foot snake emerge from the well that Roosevelt just came from, cursing the air and about to decimate this entire team that Roosevelt has put together. And in the next panel, a nun sits behind a window and slowly backs away. And before the creature can strike, Roosevelt would have something come to mind. He can only emerge in the possessed body of animals, meaning he's made of flesh, meaning shoot him. And as the entire team begins to sound off their rifles towards this giant monster of Lal Qatal, Roosevelt would have to wait 3 seconds for his legendary pack to rejoice, and with this team subduing this enemy, this would be no problem, and the 3 seconds would come. And at the very last moment, Roosevelt would aim directly in this giant snake's mouth, pulling the trigger and utterly exploding the top of its head. And with the next panel, we would see this large beam of energy going flying off into the sky, and actually entering a new world as we'll see later on in the future. But in the meanwhile, Roosevelt would go on to say another one of his great speeches. No triumph of peace is as great as the supreme triumph of war. And with this amazing event, Edward Rice Burroughs would only manage to say that he wishes he could draw up such a character as Roosevelt himself to put in one of his science fiction novels. But Roosevelt only tells him that he can get to work as soon as they distribute amnesia pills to the entire village. But with this book, it would seem that the big work has not been quite cut out yet. With the next couple of panels, we would see this re-emerging beam of energy flying off actually into Mars, and to the colony of Martians who have been sitting up there waiting and watching Earth for their moment to strike. And I would have to say that their character design is a little less than par. These little Martians aren't the most menacing looking creatures, and from what I'd have to guess, I would have to imagine that they rely mostly on their knowledge. And they have a very classic 50s representation of what an alien Martian might actually look like. But as we see this beam of energy emerging up into the top tower of one of their civilizations, we would see a radio sounding off to the president of all these different Martian beings, telling him that there's a giant amount of energy heading directly towards his office. And as this Martian captain can only think that Earth has no power such as this, that no way would they even dare to send such a thing to them, we would once again see Lal Qatal make another appearance, bursting through his front window and demanding that these creatures help him get back his gem. I require an army to obtain my gem. You will grant me this. I will. Sir, are you alright? Make preparations. We must invade Earth. And with these newfound Martian beings succumbed, we would cut to our next panel where once again we would see Teddy Roosevelt and Edgar Rice Burroughs sitting there with each other a mere 11 years later, sitting in the White House and once again reconciling over one of these great Teddy Roosevelt speeches. And as Teddy begins to finish up, Edgar Rice Burroughs would tell him that this speech would be applicable even today, since the last 3 years that he's actually spoken it. And Teddy just says that the mind does seem to wander, and begins to pour another drink for these two old friends. And with a couple of drinks, Edgar Rice Burroughs would go on to tell him that he's actually begun to write the ending of his story, the one that would take place that has encapsulated all these different paranormal investigations that they've done together, until suddenly the paranormal radio once again begins to ring. Theodore, what is it? It appears the penning of your book's ending was premature, Mr. Burroughs. And with the next panel, we would cut to a blackened city with a giant black Zeppelin flying over it. And what this would actually be is the headquarters for Teddy Roosevelt's secret operations, as they begin to see the Washington Monument sending up a beam of light into the sky. And how this was actually crafted is somehow all the apes in the zoo nearby have actually escaped and begun to build this apparatus. And while they don't really know how this is even possible in the slightest, Teddy Roosevelt knows that this is for no good. Our secret Zeppelin Air Force has quarantined the area in order to mask this oddity from the public. However, reporters have begun to sneak in. I have no idea what those savage monkeys think they're building up there, but I'm gonna get it the heck off the president's Washington Monument. And once again, we would cut to one of these fantastic Teddy Roosevelt action-packed moments as he begins to leap from this giant black Zeppelin, descending in a diving kick and smashing one of these monkeys directly off the top, sending him flying down to his death, and beginning to make his way to actually deactivating this thing, until once again the paranormal radio would sound off, and they would tell him that there was trouble incoming. And with the next panel, we would see this giant alien mothership arriving from space, raining hellfire down onto the Washington Monument and sending Teddy Roosevelt down to the ground. And the only way that he could even survive this is with his awesome steampunk pack powered by the gemstone that Lal Qatal wants so badly. And as Teddy Roosevelt makes his way to the ground, once again, the strange radio would go off telling him to watch out for the beams of fire. And to us, what these would just be simple laser beams. But at this point in time, nobody really knows exactly what these are. And Teddy Roosevelt only says, well, come on then. And suddenly the ship lands, and we'd see these tiny Martian beings rolling out in their space helmets along with their tiny space rifles, telling him that they come to seek destruction, to form the spirit of discord and war. And as Teddy Roosevelt looks down at the ground, he would merely tell them that this is something so obvious. And as all these little space aliens begin to raise their weapons, telling him that they've come for the gem, Teddy once again realizes just what exactly has caused all of this. The gem. I should have known that wasn't the last we'd hear from Locketal. Entire Martian legion on my tail, and I reckon I better plan on losing the gem. Better plan for another power resource. Habsburg Treasure House from Vienna is having a show at the Smithsonian. Just pray that they brought it. And with the next couple of scenes, we would see Teddy Roosevelt hunting something very familiar down. Something that if you've ever seen the Constantine movie, or even know a general history of Roman Empire, the Spear of Destiny. Something that has been passed down for generation to generation, and the myth only holds that anybody who actually has this would have the power to beat any army in front of them. And as we're getting all these scenes of these paintings and Teddy Roosevelt running through this museum, we would see the aliens crash through the doors, telling each other to be careful, that Teddy is full of resolute and trickery, and yelling out their very own curse word of Blarn, that they fear no human man. And with this final thought, Teddy would blow the head off this little creature immediately, sending a shock of purple blood onto its friends as they scream that he will taste the malice of Mars. And as gunfire is being traded back and forth, Teddy would finally make it to the room that would hold the Spear of Destiny, and the only good thing in a hapless day. And once again, this strange and mysterious energy pack will be recharged, and the gemstone would actually be cast through a window as Teddy Roosevelt dives in for the final blow to these little Martians. But as this gemstone touches one of their hands, once again, Locketal would rise in spirit form. All living will tremble. I bring mutilation from the black pit. My time has come, and this world will be my trough. At long last, I bring doom to all man. Wait for it. Don't get ahead of yourself. Glowing item on my steam pack is the Spear of Destiny, the weapon used to pierce the side of Jesus Christ at the crucifixion. Constantine the Great claimed that the spear guided him through his providence, and Emperor Charlemagne lived and slept within reach of the spear, attributing over 47 battle victories to its powers. The spear cannot defeat Locketal. And all 45 emperors over 1,000 years claim the Spear of Destiny as a possession. And yes, I will use it to overcome you. Like I told the man before you, speak softly, carry a big supernatural stick. And once again, in a very ridiculous scene, we would see Teddy Roosevelt blasting away at Locketal for about the last time. And as this demonic presence can go on to deny the fact of his untimely death, this really wouldn't matter. Because what he doesn't know is that Teddy Roosevelt would have yet another speech for this man. And something that I enjoyed throughout this entire book is all the times that Teddy Roosevelt would continue to absolutely pop off with these presidential speeches. And while I'm not a historian myself, I can almost promise you that these are real things that this man has said, and it's only an attributing force to Frank Frazzetta of his creativity to make a superhero out of such a legendary president. Far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to the rank with those poor spirits, who neither enjoy much nor suffer, because they live in that great twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat. I dare mighty things, demon, and this battle will not be counted among the defeats. And essentially with this moment, Teddy Roosevelt gets his very last victory, and Locketal is defeated once more. And while this did happen very fast, it still managed to be something very enjoyable, and honestly, it's a story that I think you all should kind of seek out for yourselves. Because Frank Frazzetta happens to be a very legendary writer, and somebody who's actually written quite a bit of different comic books that I've read. And I happen to know that he has an upcoming appearance in the new Distillery line of comics, something that was actually booted up by Zack Snyder, as well as James Tynion, and a ton of different comic book writers. And while I did read the first issue and wasn't too pleasantly surprised or too blown away, I do think it will be something that eventually in the long run will be successful. But nonetheless, Locketal is dead, and with the next scene, we would only see Teddy Roosevelt holding the head of this ancient demonic and Mayan god. And just like the lost head of this creature, the Martians would lose this powerful curse that has befuddled them, and realize just the wrong that they have done, staring Teddy Roosevelt in the face and becoming utterly petrified at realizing what the repercussions of such an act activity could actually be. The demon led us into this war with lies and false documents. We should have investigated thoroughly before blindly marching to battle. Humanity has an ally in the Martian kingdom. But before we can see these Martians taking off back to their home planet, something else would happen. As a reporter would begin to run up to Teddy Roosevelt, as well as Edgar Rice Burroughs, and actually ask them if he would be able to go off to Mars with them, to actually document the lives of these creatures, and this would be none other than John Carter himself, the main character of the real Edgar Rice Burroughs' biggest novel yet. John Carter, something that has been read across the entire world, and something that even has a Disney adaptation of it. Not something that I've quite seen before, but nonetheless, this managed to be such a cool little tie-in character to actually see this man be real, and actually brought into this setting, and have another way to kind of connect a real-world material to this fictional work of art. And as Teddy Roosevelt begins to ask this character if this is really what he wants, he would say absolutely yes, and he began to board the Martian ship, and with the next scene, he will call back to these two men standing there and tell them to tell his wife that one day he will be back. For now, John Carter is making his way to Mars. And this is honestly another scene that I found to be quite hilarious. This man takes no extra effort of actually allowing his family to know, completely dropping everything behind and just taking off. But with the final battle won and L'Hopital set to an end, we would only see Edgar and Roosevelt standing in a field together, reminiscing about this last battle and something that would surely become the ending of Edgar's book. And as these two stand there, soaking up the glory of this entirely ridiculous battle, Edgar would go on to ask just what exactly is powering the pack this time. The Spear of Destiny. It seems folly to allow it to remain in the Hasburg treasure house where anybody could obtain it. It'll be fine, Edgar. In these modern times, there are many left who put any credence in the supernatural. I'll return it once we've cleaned all this up. But you've lost your gem. Without it, you'll have no ultra-human abilities. Does this mean? Yes. It would seem that this will serve as an unparalleled final adventure. And while this is essentially the end of our story, there is one page left, and this is the part that really blew my mind away and really left me kind of scared for maybe what a sequel to this book could actually be, as it's something so utterly shocking and something that I would have never guessed in a million years that we would see this final and ultimate villain. Something that could be worse than even a Mayan god of evil, a character so real, and a character who would bring over a decade of pain and suffering to the entire planet. But nonetheless, obviously a way to make us remember this story. Because as we cut to our next panel, we would see a shockwave of lightning over this small museum in Vienna, and inside, a most peculiar child, as we would see him looking over the Spear of Destiny with wonder in his eyes. Pretty neat, huh? Rumor has it, the spear holds great power. They say that the army that holds it is indomitable. What is your name, son? Adolf. Well, Adolf, the museum is closing. You come back tomorrow, and I'll tell you all about it. And this, as strange as it would seem, is the end of our story. Something so entirely evil, and honestly, I don't know how Frank Frazzetta would even come up with such a thing. And I can't really decide if I want a sequel, or if I want to see the story be put away forever. Because Frank Frazzetta would end this in such a twist, and in such a way that I couldn't even imagine. And like I said, I only found this book just kind of browsing the internet, and just kind of buying weird and random horror montages of comic books, and to see this thing slapped in there, and to first read it and come across Teddy Roosevelt actually being kind of an action hero, and then to come to this ending where Adolf Hitler as a young boy would come across the Spear of Destiny, and to just end the story there, managed to be such an interesting and wild ride through it, and something that ultimately I hope you all had a lot of fun with, as I know that I did. As I know that when I was sitting at work in a car, just kind of reading this on my break, I was utterly and completely blown away. But without a doubt, Creatures by Frank Frazzetta managed to be one hell of a story, and something so insanely fun. So everybody, let me know what you think of this thing. Let me know if you want to go out and find the other copies of it. I can't tell if there's actually more issues that maybe involve different legendary characters throughout our own actual history, or if there may be just variant covers of this thing. But overall, it definitely makes me want to go seek out more Frank Frazzetta. Like I said, I think I've seen him in the new Distillery comic books, but I'm almost positive that I've actually seen this man in other short story comics. But without a doubt, I will never see Theodore Roosevelt the same again, and I hope you won't either. I hope that this is the image that is burned in your mind for such a great man who has accomplished so much throughout of history. This is something else, alright? And I'd be very interested to see what you all think down in the comments, and if you happen to be new to this channel, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and even possibly subscribe. And most importantly, come check out our Discord, where we have a bunch of awesome little conversations, where we kind of share good reads and things like that. It's been a very interesting experience, and I've actually managed to make a few good friends on there, to have some pretty good conversations, and to actually wrangle up a group of like-minded people. And it's been a lot of fun actually sitting down and talking to some of you. Sometimes we hang out in the voice channel, sometimes I'll be streaming games on there. But if you do want to join, the link is down in the description. And once again, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next episode of From the Heart, with hopefully more legendary battles, with more Hellraiser, with more harrowing tales, or even just some more Batman. I don't know. We'll see. But yes, everybody, have yourself an absolutely fantastic night, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.